So, going into the weekend and today, Trump has been pretty busy, to say the least. He brokered peace between India and Pakistan. That didn't cost us anything, by the way. He got Zelensky to agree to a meeting with Putin. He announced that China agreed to a 90-day trade deal. Hamas released the last American hostage. The stock market added almost $2 trillion in value today. And he's going to cut drug costs by as much as 80%.
Nation, we are going to pay the lowest price there is in the world. We will get whoever is paying the lowest price. That's the price that we're going to get. So remember that. So we're no longer paying 10 times more than another country. Whoever is paying.
Well, ain't that something? I'll wait for the applause from all the haters on all these things, but mostly on this drug. So remember this doozy? Biden claimed that he brought down insulin to $15 from $400 a shot.
We brought down the price of prescription drugs, which is a major issue for many people, to $15 for an insulin shot as opposed to $400.
Well, a couple things blatantly dishonest and wrong about that. But remember when the media let him get away with it and they fawned over him for that?
Look at the things that the president has been doing, from reducing prescription drug prices, capping insulin prices at $35.
We need to run against Republicans. So we're lowering the cost of insulin to $35, right? Which it should even be lower given how long insulin's been around.
While Republicans continue their streak of voting against things that voters overwhelmingly support, like putting a cap on insulin prices.
All right, but look, I know you'll be shocked by this, but they didn't tell you the whole story. Shocker, right? I know. Here's the real story. First, this was Trump's initiative from the beginning. In 2020, in July, actually, he signed an executive order that made something called the 340B program accessible on insulin that brought it down from as high as $300 or $400 a vial, not a shot, as Biden said, a vial, down to $10 to $20 a vial for the consumer. Biden simply came in 2 years later and snuck into the Inflation Reduction Act and it passed a law that says, hey, you can only charge $35 a vial. That's the law and that's final, and took credit for all of it. The problem with that is it's literally price control, and I don't like that because it's communist. FYI, insulin costs about $10 a vial to make, okay? But instead of just throwing some communist price tag on a drug, Trump is addressing the root causes for high drug prices, which, by the way, other countries don't have. First, there is no centralized price negotiation for any medical treatment anywhere in America. If you walk into an ER, into a hospital, whatever, here's my insurance card. I have a broken leg. I need a kidney. I have to deliver a baby. Ask them what it will cost. They can't tell you. Because when you come into a hospital, they have to go to 50 different people at their hospital, as you can see here, and reps from a variety of different cares and companies, and depending on who insures you, there are set prices from anything from the medical rep to the PBM to the unions, the doctors, the insurance, to tell them how much they can charge for this or that. So in this time, you get the surgery and the leg cast or the treatment because you have to have it. The baby's not going to wait. And if you have insurance, 30 days later, you'll get a bill for like, I don't know, 90 grand, and insurance covers maybe 87,000 of it, and then you pay $3K. Almost none of that is based on the actual cost of the drugs or the treatment or the service itself. Here's the kicker. If you have no insurance and decide to walk away from that 90K bill, guess who eats that bill? The hospital. And that, ladies and gentlemen, scholars and economists, is why some of these hospitals charge $11 for a single aspirin. See how that all fits together? They got to cover their costs somewhere. But the second part of the cost of drugs in America is because the cost of R&D, the research and development. And look, and I'm actually kind of good spending a bunch of money on this, but wow, this amount, it cost about $1 billion, as much as 10 to 15 years, too, to bring one successful drug to market. Now, I know you're thinking, wait, well, what about the COVID vaccine? Yeah, no, that's why I didn't take that thing. Anyway, even after all that, about 90% of drugs fail clinical trials. That means for one successful drug to hit the market, it can cost over $10 billion when you smarts it out among other losses. A lot of that is regulatory cost to do business, not the actual cost of the drug. Government imposes a lot of those. But here's what's really going to get you. The U.S. subsidizes a lot of that global innovation. Yep, Wuhan was one of those subsidies, But when that drug makes it to market, only about 20 to 30% of the revenue that these drug companies make from that drug goes back to R&D, because you and I footed the bill for that already. This is the one thing that is going to be hard to bring down the cost of, I know, because you want to get it right, because it goes into people's bodies and, we'll have to be safe. But since most of these companies enjoy some level of immunity from prosecution, like the COVID vax, for example, we could probably reform that a little bit. Maybe they should be footing their own bill instead of minting 40 new billionaires like they did during COVID. But something that can be addressed is the complex, and this is like the main problem with our drug system, complex supply chain that our drugs go through. Right now, you go to your pharmacy, you get a drug, and it's a lot like the hospital scenario. The pharmacy then, by law in many states, has to ask if you're insured or buying out of pocket. And if you're buying out of pocket, they may be able to just give you the drug for 10 or 20 bucks and then send you on your way and go home. But if you are insured, the pharmacy can't actually give you a price right away. First, they have to find out what the manufacturer charges, the drug wholesaler, but because you have insurance, the pharmacy then has to cross-check with that, with the PBM and the pharmacy benefits manager, who looks at that list and tells them, hey, how much can we choke out of each one of these insurance companies? If you have Medicare or Medicaid, forget about it. Only after they talk to the manufacturer about what they should charge for the drug in the first place. And sometimes the pharmacy itself takes home less money after charging you more for the same drug than if you were to just buy it cash outright. For instance, a few years ago, Mometasone, a nasal allergy spray, Medicare Part D pays $5.22 per spray. Over-the-counter price was 18 cents. I'm not even know what some of these things. This is heartburn medication, Omeprazole or something. It's a relief drug for heartburn. Medicare Part D paid $28.75 per capsule, while the over-the-counter price, 80 cents. Now, if you don't believe me, just listen to this pharmacy owner. He explains the whole thing.
This medication is called imatinib, and it costs us $7 to buy. We add $10, so you're out the door, $17 with your cancer medication. When Medicare pays for this drug, however, it costs them $2,400.
Woof. Probably thinking price caps are good, huh? Nope, hold that. Don't, because the free market should dictate this. And here's why. They should actually allow the free market to dictate it. If companies are not making enough off one drug, you know how they'll make up the cost for other drugs? By raising the cost for those. I mean, it's amazing, right? Now, the next part of this supply and demand, look, this gets even more complicated. Stay with me, folks, but this is what Trump's dealing with. Did you know that for roughly 100 critical drugs, the entire U.S. supply, all of it, for 100 critical drugs, comes from one single factory in China? They want to raise prices, they just slow down production. That's one reason why Trump is trying to bring the manufacturing for this back here to increase supply and decrease dependency on China. But the other reason is intellectual property theft. When our companies ship those FDA-approved, those billion-dollar studies that took 15 years to get the FDA approval for, those pharmacy recipes go over to the factory in China, and oftentimes the Chinese factories take them, they turn them around, and they make a generic version that causes a ton of lost revenue for the same drug companies, which was part of the recent negotiations on the tariff deal that Trump just scored with China. Stack that on the nearly $500 million in Big Pharma spends on lobbying. Also add that to the tab of 50% of our commercials on TV today are Big Pharma. Many other countries that are banned and they're not even allowed to market direct to consumer. That's why you pay 600% more than it costs to produce the darn drug. That's what Trump's trying to fix. You see why this couldn't be done in like the first 100 days? And since the left cheered for Biden when he slapped some Soviet-style price cap, I'll wait for their applause on this new initiative. It'll affect actually all drugs, not just insulin.
He loves the Constitution. He fights for what's right. He hates the bad guys. He's a freedom warrior. He's your freedom warrior. Watch Carl Higbie every weekday on Newsmax.